started work January 1st, 1971, and continued on, I think, until 75. I think the same month I started, in January 1971, Archie Nelson became the general manager then. Actually, Archie hired me at the National Holstein Convention, I think in Boston. That was in 1970, in June of 1970. Or at least he mentioned to me he'd like to have me come to work for All West, and I would be taking Melvin George's place. Melvin was involved with the California dairy breeders, and they had just merged with All West then and so forth, and Vic Gray, who was manager of the California dairy breeders, came up then and was assistant manager of All West breeders. So anyway, I replaced Melvin and took over the advertising and communication responsibilities, and that continued on then for about 4 years in various adventures, so to speak. Then after, I think it was the second or third year, I developed a little slogan for our advertising program called "One Jump Ahead." We would incorporate that into our ads, a picture of this chessman, which is actually a bull, and that went on for several years and created a lot of excitement. In fact, we have a picture of a crew, several of the salesmen at All West at one of our sales meetings, with all the guys standing up in a row with their right foot out, like one jump ahead. The boys down at Western Dairy Journal do the artwork on that. Our first ad ran with them of that one jump ahead, and then in the spring of 1973 we had a 50-page spread in the Holstein World with the one jump ahead program, just All West. And I put that all together, 50 pages of ads, which was quite a task. I think the Holstein World was probably $300 or $400 a page then, and nobody hardly did full color because that was too expensive, you know. Now everybody does full color. You don't see any black and white. Seamen were sales, I don't know, those top bulls would sell for $5 or $10 a unit then. I think Highmark towards the tail end was bringing $20. In fact, one time Archie sold 400 units at one crack to I think for $20 a unit, which was a big deal, to a Canadian breeder. So that was kind of the height of my advertising career there. After a year or two, I got involved with taking cow and bull pictures. It was so darn hard for us to get someone up. Well, Bill Serpa was the only photographer in the West Coast at that time, and he was 800-900 miles down the road. So I started doing cow daughter pictures and bull pictures, and that saved us a lot of time and effort, and which ultimately got me going in a couple years then on into my own. When I left All West Breeders, I left actually going into the cattle photography phase of my period of work. In 1971, when I started, the people that were there, many of them, like Louis Makota and Carl Pohl, who took care of the semen processing, they were there just about from day one in 1941, and that was the original farm where things began in 1941. It was always quite a deal when we first started doing bull pictures. Of course, that was a big deal with the boys because it was always hustle bustle to get the bulls ready and so on, but it worked pretty good. The boys were very good at handling the bulls, and We always got some nice pictures. Of course, no matter taking cow pictures, it's always a major problem to get them broke to lead and washed and clipped and all that. That part hasn't changed much, except we weren't quite so fussy back in those days and we didn't do it like they do it now. It's pretty easy now to snap a picture and straighten the top line out and clean them up and so on. Some of the bull barn crew, of course, when we did daughter pictures, had to go out and help us do those too, and those were pretty exciting days and times. All West had a great crew of people out in the barn, Louis Makota and Carl Pohl and Pat Brown and Ray Rubel and 3 or 4 other individuals took care of the bulls and collected the semen and all of those important activities. And I suppose there were 60 or 70 bulls on the farm there at one time. And the office crew, we've talked about the bull crew, but my goodness, we had a really good staff of office girls. A lot of them had been there a number of years. And recently, some have retired that had been there 30, 40 years. It started back when I was there. So the longevity of the office crew was mighty long, and that speaks well for the crew. Everybody got along together and worked together. And my secretary, I had Ida Van Zanten. My goodness, she was one of the best. You gave her something to do, and she got it done, come hell or high water, and they got it done quickly. And of course, back then there was not the new machines we have now. There was no fax machines then, I don't think. So it was mimeographs and the electric typewriter. That was the hot item of the day, and photocopy. There was a lot of photocopying going on. But Ida had to work really hard when it was bulletproof time. They came out twice a year then, and so that was a big deal to get all that information out to the technicians. And we had a little publication then we called the Tech Memo that went out monthly to technicians, and that had all the updated information and mailed out in an envelope with pictures and proofs, and so then the technicians would give that information to their customers. And the bull book was a big deal once a year. Certainly was an exciting period during the 70s. That was kind of the highlight of the Holstein. Actually, all the breeds were in their heyday about then. The Holstein breed was truly on a roll then, and of course the other very interesting phase of All West, their business that they were doing then, or started to do, was the exotic cattle business. The exotic bulls were really the most exciting period for a couple, 3 years there. And I actually spent a month in Europe with Gordy Suter. Gordy was the bull buyer then for BCAI up at Milner, British Columbia. And so he and I spent actually 4 weeks in 5 different countries in Europe. Gordy had permits then to buy several different bulls. All West, we weren't in the business of buying bulls, but we exchanged and did business with BCAI then, and they had some good dairy bulls and beef bulls, and they wanted a place down here to distribute some of their good bulls, and then of course we made available some of our good bulls down here for them to use up there. So it was kind of a mutual agreement type thing, and that lasted a few years, and it all came to a stop then when All West joined Select Sires, and that was the end of that relationship. But it worked out really well, and Gordy Suter and his crew were very wonderful people to work with, and it was a mutual benefit for both organizations. In the beef program, there were a lot of beef bulls from BCAI. And we also worked with tri-state breeders and then some other distributors to get our various Simmental, Chianina, Maine and Jew, and a whole bunch of other new breeds. So that whole mix there was the most exciting era of, I think, of AI, of all AI organizations, because people were going wild over crossbreeding, and Angus breeders were using Simmental and Chianina, and Hereford breeders, and on it went. And then the few times that I was at Denver, we had a booth at Denver with, in conjunction with tri-state breeders, and that was in the height of the exotic business, and so that was real interesting. Archie, of course, had been there 3-4 years and knew all the ropes, and certainly knew about buying bulls, and he continued to help for a year or two, as Melvin George became the sire analyst then, and so there were some pretty important bulls that were purchased during those years. And of course, Puget Sound Highmark, I guess, would have been the most exciting bull back then. God, we sold a lot of semen on him, and to Canada and all over the world, actually. The Marcus son, Romandale Reflection Marcus, and out of one of the great cows that Puget Sound had, the Waltner brothers at Mount Vernon, and comes from a great deep cow family, and went on to sire some All-Americans, and certainly was a top bull of the Holstein breed for a year or two there. Then another important bull was Carnation Royal He-Man. Of course, came from Carnation Farm, and was sired a lot of great daughters. In fact, Cliff Bailey, I think he had an excellent Carnation Royal He-Man daughter, and there were several others around the country. And then there was another great bull from California, Wilmer Gomes, bred Wilbur Pride Admiral Peachum. Peachum was a great bull, and again sired a lot of excellent daughters, and I took a number of pictures down in California. In fact, Wilbur had an excellent daughter of him, and he went on to sire a lot of great cattle. Yes, Highmark was the number one bull. There were some others. I have trouble remembering some of those names, but Foxlease Virginia Gentleman was a good bull, and Carnation Royal He-Man, we mentioned him. And some Guernsey Bulls too. There we had Western Glow Dairy. Most was considered the number one Guernsey bull of the breed in America in those years. And he came from Ben Fredericks right at Bow, Washington. Although Ben didn't breed that bull, he was bred by a neighbor of Carl, of the Cragness family, Carl's dad. I think right across the road that farm was. And I can't remember that breeder's name, but the bull's name was not Western Glow, but in those days you could change the name. So Ben had the name changed. Yeah, Western Glow Dairy most was. In fact, there's a little bit of semen left of him around yet. In fact, George Magnoshi down at Carnation has a daughter of him, and he also still has some Dairy Most semen left. And George has some semen of the sire of Western Glow Dairy Most left, and some Guernsey or Jersey bulls too. Certainly the Jersey breed was an important breed in Washington and Oregon and California then. Head Spring Gallant, who came from North Carolina or South Carolina, he is a bull that was a proven bull when All West bought him. In fact, we flew him up on a big airplane of some kind, and he came up in a big crate. I remember we went down to the airport, and picked him up, but he had a great pedigree and did well for All West for several years. And there were some other good Jersey Bulls, and it's interesting to note in one of the early All West publications that in 1944 in Whatcom County there were 700 Jersey cows bred and only 50 Holstein cows. In 1944, at the beginning of All West breeders. Well, I was Holstein fieldman. Before I came with All West, I was Holstein fieldman for the National Holstein Association for 4 years in the Northwest. I live in Seattle, and we covered, at that time, the fieldman for Holstein covered 7 Northwest states. So I would travel to not only Washington, but Oregon, Idaho, Utah, Montana, and Colorado. And there were, virtually hundreds of registered breeders. I would imagine 4 times as many registered breeders as there are now. We started a series of programs called District Black and White Shows. And I think in Washington there was probably, in those years, 6 or 7 different districts where there would be a show and a judge, and people would bring their cattle in to show them. Well, there'd be probably 60, 70, 80 head at a lot of these district shows, like up in Deer Park and Sunnyside, Washington, and Ellensburg and Southern Washington and Chehalis and so on. And this provided a great opportunity for breeders to show their cattle and get together and mingle and visit and so forth. In addition, there were a number of local club sales also back then, and All West would get involved to the extent of supporting them, and certainly a lot of the animals at the shows were sired by All West animals, and so there was a great camaraderie of these district shows. And I think back then, in order to show then at the state show, you had to show at the district show, and that was part of the purpose of the district show, to get more involvement and so on in the state show. And Bill Serpa would come up from California and travel around at these shows and take pictures, and it was a big deal, and created a lot of excitement and helped promote the Holstein breed for sure. And when Whatcom County had a Holstein meeting, or Skagit County and other counties, there'd be 30, 40, 50 people at those meetings. And then for a couple of years, All West had a sale too. I think 73 or 4, we had the All West Super Sale, or I think it was called. And in fact, there was a cow that sold that year for $7,500, and that, I think her name was Vernway bred cow, and she topped the sale at $7,500, and she was the highest selling animal of all the AI sales in America that year. So that was pretty important. But that was a good program because it gave a lot of purebred breeders that were All West patrons a chance to consign to a top-notch sale, which included all the West animals, of course, and it created a lot of excitement and interest for the organization. But yes, All West was certainly involved. They, helped support a lot of the 4-H club activities. Have been truly an active organization, and the leadership, my goodness, the presidents they've had have been great people and have brought the organization along. And of course, Cliff Bailey, he was not only president of All West Breeders, but he was national president of the Holstein Association back in the 80s, and he was the real key to the merging of All West and Select. The best part was the people were wonderful to work with. Everybody got along, and there weren't any problems like there could be with some organizations. And we, for me, it was great because I was working basically with the same group of people I'd worked with for 4.5 years earlier as Holstein Fieldman. So I was still working with the same clientele basically. Archie then was my boss, and he was the greatest of the great, and he was one of the few AI managers that was really a great cow man, and he's probably, well, as far as I know, he's the only AI manager in history that ever judged Madison. Back in the 70s, he judged the Holstein show at Madison, and that was a great honor, and you don't get that honor if you don't know something about cows, and Archie knew everything there was to know about cows and then some, and he knew all the Holstein breeders, and he was just a great fellow, and he attracted a lot of great people in the organization. I was able to do a lot of traveling, and I enjoyed that part too. I got into Idaho and Utah as we worked with Cache Valley and Montana, and of course California. When we had the sales, the All West sales, Pat Brown would crank up his barbecuer and barbecue salmon, and he did that for several years, and that was always a grand event, whether we had the sale or a sales meeting or annual meeting or whatever. Pat was always on deck to do the barbecuing. And of course Ray Rubel, when I started, he was working with bulls then. He was a great bull man. He came from Coopville. He had a farm on Coopville, and him and Dora came to work about the same time. And my goodness, Dora just retired here this last year, and she was a great lady and was a great help to the staff to the All West staff there. And Vic Gray was assistant manager. He had a lot of knowledge and knew a lot about the California part of the business. So we and I had an opportunity those years to go to the Denver Stock Show every year. That was in January, and a big deal because that was the big beef show. I enjoyed my years immensely. Then I took off in 1975 to go into the cow picture business. Then I took over Northwest Holstein News in 1976, and the rest is history there. Yeah, those were the good old days for sure. The whole AI industry was, well, there was just a little more camaraderie than there is now, I think. Again, I was working the last 30 years with the same group of people, with the All West staff again, and I have enjoyed my camaraderie with the All West gang for nearly 50 years. So it's been a good run for me. And that's how the All West was won, for sure.